Hello, everyone. Welcome to Facebook Live with the Horticulturists. We're glad to be back. It's been since December? It's been a while.
Been a while.
Yeah, we've all been kind of just laying low for the winter while our gardens are laying low. But we're glad to be back. My name is Candice Hart. I'm a horticulture educator here in Central Illinois, as well as the interim state master gardener coordinator. And I'm glad to be here with my colleagues.
Hi, I am Kelly Allsup, and I'm also a horticulture educator. I'm based out of Bloomington. My passions are pollinators, beneficial insects, pretty much anything creepy crawly, but I like growing vegetables and growing flowers too.
And I'm Ryan Pankau. I'm a horticulture educator as well, right here in Champaign, Urbana, where we're filming at today. My specialty is woody plants and vegetables, I'd say, are probably the things I focus on most. I'm also a lover of all the natives. Try and plant as many natives as I can.
Excellent. Yeah, so we are here to answer all of your gardening questions. So if you have any questions about anything gardening related, shoot it into the comments here on this live, and we will answer all of those questions as best as we can. But to get us started, we brought some stuff with us today from our gardens and stuff that's kind of going on in our landscape. So I didn't really say what my specialty is, but it's definitely flowers. That's my deal. I grow a lot of cut flowers. Most of my landscaping is flower focused. So I brought today one of my favorite perennials. Mainly because it's one of the earliest things to flower. It's like the earliest perennial that flowers in my garden, and it's a Lenten Rose or a Hellebore. This one I just picked up at the garden center today, so you'll find them at garden centers right now. And they just have gorgeous flowers to them. Most of the time they're either kind of burgundies, or the ones I cut from my garden today are more of kind of a lighter pink burgundy. You can get greens and whites. They're just gorgeous flowers, and they grow in shade. So it's kind of hard to find good stuff for the shade garden. So that's why another reason I love Lenten Rose, because I can just fill up my whole shade garden with it in amongst the hostas and all the other stuff. And the foliage is great too. It actually stays pretty much evergreen a lot of times in the winter too. So you kind of have that kind of 4 seasons of something to look at in the garden, which is awesome.
Yeah, really pretty colors too. I like all the colors the flowers come in.
Yeah, they have very cool color patterns. Yeah. So we'll give you a close-up on some of those there. Yeah, and if you do want to cut these, so I use these a lot as a cut flower, like in bouquets and arrangements. And that you can cut them at this stage when they still have kind of all their pollen, they're still really flowering, but they hold up a lot better if you wait a little bit until they kind of have their seed pods formed in the middle. They're a little hardier at that point. That's really a good time to cut them. But if you don't, they also will just stay on the plant for a long time too. So they last for a long time.
So what would you say? How long? A couple weeks?
No, at least like a couple months. If you just let them kind of dry on the plant and just leave the seed pods on them, they'll stay looking pretty good for a couple months. Yeah.
Wow.
Very cool.
They're awesome.
Hard to get that out of a shade plant.
Exactly.
No.
That's the thing. It's like it's so hard to find stuff that flowers in the shade nicely, especially this early in the year. So yeah, it's a great. If you've never tried it, definitely try yourself some Lenten Rose. It's great. Yeah.
And it's a really great transition to my topic because Hellebores are visited by bees.
True.
And when we think about bees, they come out in the spring and they don't have a lot to eat. So that's why, we are really happy about early spring flowering trees, and Hellebores is one of them. And there's some bulbs out there like grape hyacinths. It's really great for pollinators. But I wanted to talk about some pollinator annuals today. And we do have some cool season annuals that we have right here in the studio. And we have snapdragon and sweet alyssum and pansies. Now, all of these will feed the bees. And so if you're, wanting to plant some of those cool seasons, go ahead, plant them out now. Sweet alyssum, I'm excited that sometimes it comes back because it overseeds.
Yeah, yeah, I love that too.
Another thing about snapdragons is it is the larval source for the buckeye butterfly, which means the caterpillar of the beautiful buckeye butterfly will eat snapdragons. So if you see some caterpillars eating up your snapdragon plants, just go ahead and let them do it. And then, pansies are notorious for some bumblebees, so that is another great option. But, being the pollinator person I am, I want to show you some rock stars. I have some pictures, and these are pollinator magnets. The first picture we have is Salvia black and blue.
I love Salvia black and blue.
Tons of bees and butterflies. I actually went to the 4th of July parade last year at Miller Park Zoo in Bloomington, and there was a planting of black and blue salvias, and they were just covered in bees, and it was just really cool to see. Another one is Cosmos. Really easy to start from seed. Yeah. Great for the pollinators. And then the third one is Mexican sunflower called Tejonia. Now, it's another one that we start from seed. It actually gets really tall, so it's a background planting. But butterflies you'll have butterflies all over these flowers, and they flower, all season long. Zinnias, another great annual to put into your garden, easy to start from seed. You can almost, you pop the old seed, the old flower head off, and then there's your seeds, and just throw them at the ground in the spring.
Super easy.
And they'll start germinating.
So as far as timing on direct seeding some of these flowers, now, is it too early? What should folks be thinking about?
If I were to direct seed them in the garden, I would wait a little bit longer. The temperature of the soil probably needs to be a little bit warmer, because we know seeding, some of the success of seeding is temperature. If it gets warm, then it'll seed fast.
You could toss out some Sweet Alyssum seed, though.
So these cool season ones are ready to go right now. Those other ones that I talked about, the Rockstars, I would wait till May 10th is our last frost-free date here. And then I wanted to show you a picture of one that I'm going to try. I've never grown this before. It's called Spanish Flag. I took a picture of this at I think it was at Longwood Gardens, if I'm not mistaken.
Cool.
And it was mixed with they mixed it with some succulents, but I thought, this is a gorgeous plant. I'd love to plant this. And then I looked up, found out that hummingbirds really like this plant. So both Candice and I have both decided that we are going to try this plant out this year and see how it goes. And I found it no problem. I found seed in the Garden Center, no problem.
Yeah, you told me the other day, and I'm like, what's that? And then I looked it up, and I'm like, oh, this looks really cool. I'm going to have to try it.
And, in that picture, it's with, senecio, blue chalk sticks. It's with flapjack, and it's just gorgeous combination.
A cool succulent combo, yeah. And it's a trellising plant, right?
Yeah,
so you should grow it up on some kind of...
Yeah, you're either going to trellis it, or what I'm going to do is let it trail over some of my pots.
There you go.
So usually when I have a climber... If I don't have a trellis, then I just let it be like a spiller.
Awesome.
Yeah, that works great.
I love it.
I do too. Cool. I'm excited.
I'm excited to try it.
And hopefully I can get a picture of a hummingbird visiting it. Of course, the hummingbird is going to be blurry. But
but it makes sense with those red kind of tubular flowers. That's like primo hummingbird.
Yeah, really does make sense.
And
for sure.
Hummingbirds have been spotted in southern Illinois.
Ooh, already?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So you know what that means?
Awesome.
If you have hummingbird gardens, or you do actually have a hummingbird feeder, it's time. Put it out.
Time to start
cool.
getting it out there.
I didn't know they were getting that close.
Yeah.
Awesome. No cool. We'll keep those questions coming into the chat box. We will start addressing those here, but I want to hear what Ryan's got going on in his landscape.
I didn't bring in quite as flashy of a flower. Actually, this is just a flower structure beginning, but this is one of my favorite plants from this early part of you. Would you mind giving me a backdrop?
Be the hand
Vanna.
This is pussy willow. So the specimen I brought in here is actually not a native pussy willow, but we do have a native pussy willow. This is a variety from Eurasia that was probably developed more for its ornamental value. But what we're seeing here is as these buds start to open up, we have these little fluffy structures. Thus the name pussy willow. Looks kind of like a cat. And eventually the male catkins will come out of these. So there's male and female plants on pussy willow. So that's something to pay attention to if you want to plant it, that you probably want to try and get a male plant so that you get these structures. But it's kind of neat. Like the fuzziness, we think, is there to kind of protect these developing flowers when it gets cold this time of year. So it gives them a little extra protection. And then they'll emerge, and there's actually, if you look at all the different cultivated varieties of these, there are a ton of really beautiful ones that have different colored flowers, and there's quite a variety. Our native version would just have kind of yellow flowers, but they're little dangly catkins that hang out there. They're wind pollinated, so they're not really producing much nectar, attracting a lot of pollinating insects, but they rely on wind to spread that pollen. So one of my favorites in spring, and it's just a really good example of buds starting to swell and explode, and that whole process happening for woody plants as they begin to wake up from the winter. And it's just a really critical time in all the development of these woody plants for the rest of the year. They're investing a lot of energy in all this bud development and everything else. So we're really past the pruning window on most anything in Central Illinois. So just kind of wanted to point that out to folks and remind you, if you're needing to prune something, you probably need to wait till after we get full leaf development. And I usually say in Central Illinois, it's probably about June or so, mid-June to late June, really. And the reason being, this plant has invested a lot of energy in development of these buds and leaves and other things. And if those leaves can't grow and develop large enough to produce some photosynthesis and return some energy to the plant, and we prune some of these off, that's just a net loss for the energy the plant has for the year.
Wasted all that energy. Yeah.
Wasted a lot of energy on development there. So just a critical time in woody plants. And if you're ever wondering in the early spring, is it too late to prune or not? Start to look at these buds, and you can actually see when the bud scales start to separate a little bit. And one tip I've given folks is to look up and down the stem. Don't just look at the buds at the tips. Like a lot of times the buds at the tips are going to probably start to emerge first. So especially if you can see a difference in the size of buds between the tips and down the stem, that's a good indicator. If your plant's starting to invest some energy there, that's we need to not prune. Hold off till summer. So
I had someone ask me the other day, they hadn't pruned like their apples or pears or anything, and I said, well, take a look at the buds, and if they're starting to break, you really should just kind of wait at this point.
I think
it is. It's too late.
Yeah, definitely.
Exactly.
I mean, cherries and peaches and things were, weeks ago probably here in Central Illinois around early March. Apples are starting to come out. So, unfortunately, the ship has sailed on pruning fruit trees now. You can always address that in the summertime.
Exactly. Wait till the summer, or if they're in fine shape, just wait till the next dormant season. Wait till next winter, and they'll be fine.
Yeah, because you're going to do the least impact to the plant's health to prune during the dormant season. So if you can wait till next winter, that'd be best. If there's just stuff that really has to come out of there. What I do a lot of my fruit trees during the summertime is pruning of some of the water sprouts. The sprouts that just grow straight up off the stem, and sometimes your winter pruning actually promotes the development of some of those, and you need to follow up in the summer.
Yeah, that's another thing to think about too. Like whenever you prune, you think about, you're taking all this growth away, but also what you're doing is you're encouraging a lot more growth too. You're stimulating buds to break, so you kind of have to balance it out.
Yeah.
Very cool, very cool. Another thing I love about like your pussy willow and the other willows is that they root so easily.
Yes.
So I bought some of that pussy willow just cut at a market a couple months ago. That's probably like 2 months ago. And I trimmed it down because I was just going to put it in a vase and kind of enjoy it dried. And what I did is I took the stems that I cut off, threw them into some soil, and now they're rooting. And I'm going to plant them outside now and have some new pussy willow plants, because anything in that willow family roots really easy. Like if you stick it in the ground, and if it's moist enough, you're going to have some roots started. So
that's really
they're really easy to propagate. Yeah, which is fun. Okay, let's look at some questions. Keep those coming into the chat box here. Anne wants to know how to spell the name of that shade-loving plant I was talking about. Anne, this is called a Hellebore, which is Hellebore, Hellebore, or Lenten Rose is a common name for it too. So definitely check those out for the shade. Brittany's asking, best tips for a new gardener. What would we tell a brand new gardener?
Well, if you're just starting, don't overdo it. I've definitely had
I thought you said don't ever do it. I was
no,
like, what?
don't overdo it. Don't overextend yourself in this
Yeah,
first year.
start small.
Yeah. Watering is going to be a big issue, so have a manageable amount of plants to water.
Maybe a container garden to start off with, maybe an alternative. Another thing is I'm a big, huge soil tester. If you don't know how your soil is doing and you don't amend your soil, your plants are never going to do well. So know what your soil is. One of the things that I've been doing lately, I'm sorry, I'm going to be lengthy.
No, you're good. I've got another comment for that.
Straw bale gardening.
Oh yeah.
And it's not a new concept, but what I did is I grow my stuff in straw bales, and I don't ever have to weed. And so what I do is in the beginning is I add fertilizer and water to the straw bales for about 2 weeks, and it's basically like growing vegetables in a compost. So that straw is starting to compost down, and then I start planting my plants in it. And I have a lot of that straw bale information on my blog, Flowers, Fruits, and Frass. But it's just so easy to do, and I really feel like we need to do more of it. So it's just maybe an alternative. Maybe build a raised bed or a container garden.
That's what she's working on. She said she's doing an elevated garden bed on a concrete slab, and she's planning to plant broccoli, cucumbers, zucchini, tomatoes, sugar melons, peppers. Is that too much for a first-time gardener?
Yes.
That's a lot of variety to start with. I think a raised bed is a great place to start, for sure.
Yeah, that's a really great place to start.
I think broccoli is difficult. Skip the broccoli. If you want a cool season, because that can go right into your succession planting. Do a spinach or a Swiss chard,
some kind of leafy green,
or maybe even carrots or beets. And then when those have been harvested, then you plant your cucumbers or your beans. But you can't have cucumbers, squash, and melons, because it's just going to take over everything.
They take a lot of space.
So,
really spread out.
Maybe you start with peppers or eggplant, or maybe even some herbs.
Yeah, I would maybe start
good.
with the tomatoes, the peppers for your warm season, and then maybe mix in a couple of easier cool season like the lettuces, and just see how it goes.
Yeah, and I would say, don't be stressed out if you kill something. We've all killed things, and just learn from the mistake. Try and figure out why.
For sure.
Something didn't do well. That was one thing I stressed out a lot about when I first started gardening. Is if something didn't go perfect, and it's probably not going to, but it'll work out. You'll learn from your mistakes and get better for next year.
And always look on our website, Brittany, too. We have a ton of information. Kelly's got her blog. We have a ton of websites on all aspects of gardening. We have a vegetable garden website, all topics. So definitely do some research, too, on our website. There's a ton of good info.
And as far as the veggie gardening thing goes, there's the updated vegetable gardening for the Midwest.
Yeah. That's a really great book, too.
Yeah, that's a book that was recently updated by some of our extension colleagues, and it really covers all the vegetable crops you could grow in Illinois, and gives you great recommendations on how to plant them, how to space them.
When to do it, best varieties.
Harvesting recommendations.
Really good stuff.
A lot of good stuff in there.
We also made a YouTube series on growing vegetables, so you can type in University of Illinois Horticulture cool season vegetables or warm season vegetables, and I did the cool season vegetable portion, and I tell you exactly how to grow everything, how to harvest, what to do. So, but I would start with, everybody's like eggplant. I would start with easy plants. I do think cucumbers and squash are easy to grow, but they have pest issues.
Yeah, they're easy to get going, but then when the pests hit, it's tricky. Yeah.
So, maybe, go with something that maybe not have so many pest issues, and then gradually build into that.
She said she's also going to do some rosemary and basil in pots, so she can bring them in for the winter. So I think that's a great place to start, too, for sure.
And my biggest suggestion on basil is don't buy a plant, grow it from seed. Because what I've noticed in my growing, I love basil, is when I buy a plant from the nursery and put it in a pot, it goes to flower really fast. But if I plant it, just broadcast the seed over the top and keep it watered, it stays in a vegetative state longer, and it tastes better, I think.
Yeah, when it goes to flower, it gets, the
That's
taste.
a big thing with basil, is trying to not let it flower. I know. It's kind of therapeutic to go pick off the flower buds.
It is. I love that.
So that's kind of your strategy with basil. As it gets larger, you pick off those flower buds, because when it starts to flower, there's changes in the plant, changes in that energy flow, and it probably affects the flavor and quality of the basil. So I'm always trying to keep mine in a vegetative state for as long as possible.
Cool. Well, good luck, Brittany. We'll be doing these throughout the season, so if you got more questions, hop back on. We're happy to help you as you get started.
And you can always email Ryan.
Yeah,
He'll give you
I answer a lot of questions over email.
For sure.
It's amazing what you can figure out from some pictures and discussion.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So always
Cool.
happy to.
Okay, Malik wants to know how to use Gladiolus. I love Gladiolus. So Gladiolus, I'm going to be talking about cannas and dahlias a little bit later. Similar to those, Gladiolus is a summer bulb. It's actually a corm. So you plant it in the spring. So right now you can go to the garden center and get bags of Gladiolus corms. You just plant them in the ground, read the depth on the package and plant them at that depth, and just go from there. And if you want to replant them and have them for the next year, in the fall you have to dig them up and save them. But Malik, they're pretty easy. Just stick them in the ground. I would pick a spot that is kind of wind protected or provided a little bit of staking, because when they do flower, they're very tall, kind of vertical flowers. And when they do flower, they can kind of flop over on you. So kind of be strategic about placement. But yeah, glads are pretty easy.
What about fertilizer? What do you do with how do you fertilize your summer bulbs?
I'd usually do a good fertilizing in the spring, and then maybe once or twice throughout the season, but I don't go too heavy for most of mine. So try them out, Malik, if you've never tried them. And of course, they're great cut flowers. You can cut them and put them in a vase. So that's why I grow them. Okay, Katie says, talk to her about peach borers. She sees evidence of them on her 3-year-old peach trees. What can she do?
Oh, she's almost
in tears over the peach borers. What do we think?
Well, peach borers, honestly, there's so many issues with peaches.
Yes.
Yeah, peaches.
Can't say that I've ever planted one or cultivated one. So I really don't have a recommendation for peach borer because I don't have experience with it.
Yeah, and I'm sure we would have a chemical recommendation that you could use in our typical recommendation. But honestly, the best thing for borers is to keep the tree healthy and vigorous. That's typically what we recommend for any type of borer issue. So if it's a drought period, water. If it needs fertilizing, fertilize, so that hopefully the tree can be healthy enough that it'll overcome having those borers in its water conducting system.
Yeah, and a good mulch ring goes a long way for just any tree health issues. So that helps trap moisture and increases nutrient cycling in the soil and other things that naturally happen.
So unfortunately, Katie, once the borer's in there, there's not a lot you can do. If you give the extension office a call, we could let you know if there would be a chemical treatment for it, but more than likely just keeping that tree healthy is going to be your best bet. Yeah, keep things growing vigorously. Okay, let's see what else we've got here. Sorry, there we go. Okay, we've got peach borers. Sean says that she cut back a couple of rose bushes last fall. One has some green on the stems and the other does not. Is it normal for the stems to not have some green on them? I would say at this point, yeah. It's still a little bit early.
Yeah.
My roses aren't doing a whole lot yet. So, Sean, I would wait a little bit, give it at least a couple more weeks and see what happens. Most of the time what I do is I wait to cut mine back till the spring, because so many times they get killed. A portion of it just gets killed back by winter anyways, that I just kind of wait and see how much of it is going to green up and leaf out, and then I'll cut back from there. That's usually what I do. But.
Yeah, a lot of times you can kind of tell what's died from winter, though, just from the change in color. So I'm guessing that's kind of where your question came from. Yeah,
and if you scratch the stem, like you can always take your nail and kind of scratch a stem like that. And if it's green underneath, that's great. But if it's not, if it's dried up and...
Yeah, you can pretty easily see the green, because that outer layer of bark is easily just kind of scratched off, and it's green in there if it's still alive.
But it's still really early.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much yet.
I think I have like one perennial spring onions coming up that in my perennial garden, and I'm hoping that other stuff come up, but I still think it's early.
Yeah, and it's quite possible that just a small portion at the base will green up, and that some of the above portion is certainly dead, but that doesn't mean the whole plant is dead.
Right.
So give it some time, wait a little bit, and see how it goes. Okay, we've got roses. Let's see what else we've got here. You guys are bringing the questions. I love it. Keep them coming. Heidi, comment about mole or vole control. She says raptor bar, ? I'm not familiar with raptor bar. But I know typically for mole vole control, trapping is going to be your best bet.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you go on our website, Heidi,
Living with Wildlife.
I was like, what's that? Living with Wildlife website. It has all of those type of animals on there. All those, some of them pest animals, some of them not, and it'll tell you how to control them, what's legal to control them with, like if you need a permit to trap, that type of stuff. But yeah, trapping tends to be your best bet.
Yeah, in general, not poisons, because they so readily get out into the environment, and other predators that would eat those smaller rodents, it bioaccumulates in their body. So that's the main reason why. I know poisons seem like a really easy thing you can do, but really don't recommend that because it can have a ripple effect through the food chain.
Yeah, and that's hard too, because you really got to find out where their burrow is and getting it in the right spot, and all of that can be tricky.
Yeah,
so.
moles can be tricky. Voles, one thing you can do is just remove some of their habitat. They're going to like any tall grassy stuff. They're going to like thatchy type material that's around the ground where they can hide in, because they're not really as subterranean as moles. They're actually on the surface quite a bit, and so that's a general recommendation, at least in my experience with large scale restoration plantings, tree plantings. That's where we got the best vole control, was just kind of controlling weeds around it and that thick brushy stuff that they're going to want to hang out in. So
Good point.
My personal experience is I've had to trap in a community garden. That was the only way, and call a professional in. And then when I was a greenhouse grower, we used to use not a chemical, it's sort of an organic compound that had castor oil in it. But it wasn't like something I could use broadly. It was something I could like protect one plant.
And it's a deterrent?
As a deterrent.
And so scent then? Was it?
Yeah, they would get sick from the castor oil.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
And so why did I have to protect the trees in the greenhouse? Because if we don't sell all our trees, we overwinter them in a greenhouse, and then the voles will get in there and eat the bark off of the base of the tree. Yeah. And so that's why we did it. But the castor oil, the deterrent, wasn't really like a large scale. I think you have to go with the trapping.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and I've also put around my fruit trees, I put a little cage around the bottom of the trunk that kind of deters some of that feeding. But the problem I found with those is that stuff gets in there.
Yeah.
And then it makes a nice, happy little home for voles too, if you have a lot of material accumulating in there. So a bit of a maintenance issue on that. But
so good luck, Heidi. I would say try some traps and see how you do. Laura's asking, talking about pruning, can we still prune roses now? Depends if it's budding out yet. I haven't looked at mine recently, but if it's still dormant, then I would say yes, you could go ahead and do that. If not, I would probably wait.
But you're always going to prune dead, dying, or
that type of stuff.
Type of sucker growth that you go to a especially an older rose bush, and you have this really huge sucker on it that has no flower buds on it. You can cut that baby out.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
that's
a good point.
For sure. And like I said, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll wait in the spring and see how much of it is actually alive, like how much of the above ground portion did actually make it, and then I'll cut out the dead from there, essentially.
And not that I have a lot of experience with old-fashioned types of roses, but knockout roses, I've pruned them back in the spring just for size control and had no problems with blooms.
Yeah, it kind of depends on the variety, I think, because knockouts are tough. I mean, those are going to be hard to kill, essentially. Great. Okay, Heather's asking, what are the advantages of a raised garden?
Oh, I know this.
Let's hear it. I love raised gardens.
Okay, what are the problems with gardeners? They don't have time to weed. In a raised bed, you have very little weeding. Another thing is when I talked about soil testing, you want to make sure you have great soil. And to amend, you got backyard amending your soil could take a little bit of work if you're not lucky enough to have great soil. But in a raised bed, you get to choose what soil you put in there, and you have the best soil. Mm-hmm. And when roots grow well, the tops grow well. So being able to, have that soil the way you want it really helps with the growth. Another thing is it actually, it warms up a little bit faster in the spring, mm-hmm. so you can plant a little bit earlier. And then, being the horticulturist we are, I want to be in full control of water. And yes, raised beds do dry out a little bit faster.
Yeah.
But I like that because I want the roots to dry out every now and then, so again, I get better growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it stays really well drained. That's a great thing for vegetable crops, especially.
And I think it's more manageable. Let's say you grow carrots in the ground, you're going to have tons of weeds, tons. You grow carrots.
And probably a hard, heavy soil.
And then it's going to be hard to harvest the carrots. Mm-hmm. But you grow them in a raised bed, you're good.
Yeah. Really, I think it's all advantages on raised beds. The only disadvantage might be cost. You're going to have some cost to build the beds and fill them with soil. But other than that, if I had an option, I'd grow everything in raised beds.
Me too.
It's just so much easier. Yeah.
Yeah. The biggest crux of the issue is the soil medium you get, where you get that, and what you use,
and the manpower to get it in the bottom.
Getting it in there. But yeah, I think you'll be really happy once you get them set up.
Absolutely.
And get some stuff growing.
I think people have these great intentions in the spring, and then they let the weeds take over, and then it kind of, they get disinterested.
Yeah.
And I think, managing, having a strategy in the spring of how you're going to manage the weeds. Maybe if you do in the garden, you lay down straw.
Some type of mulch,
to prevent weeds, because weeds are going to grow because just as well as cause you're going to water and you're going to maybe fertilize. So weeds are it's hard. I mean, getting down there and weeding all the time.
Yeah, I'm a big mulcher. That's usually my strategy mulch the heck out of it. Yeah. I like the fact that it's usually kind of early in the season as I'm getting things going that I can do a ton of mulching and a ton of work, and then later in the season when the weeds are coming on, I have kind of put that initial investment of labor in to hopefully stifle the weeds some.
I agree.
Great. Okay, Ann wants to know, where do we get the straw for straw bales? Do they have to be organic? Kelly, what's your favorite straw bale place?
I just order it from, I order from a particular place in Bloomington. It's just like kind of an old-fashioned garden center, and they actually sell straw bales for animal bedding. But
a farm store is great if you have a local farm supply store. They usually have it.
Lots of large gardeners use it when they need to mulch between their vegetables, but and the place that I order from delivers it for me. So even more awesome.
Yeah.
So you just don't do hay. You do straw because hay has weed seed in it. Again, not to keep promoting myself, but I have a YouTube video on University of Illinois Horticulture called Straw Bale Gardening, where I tell you exactly the steps of doing the straw bale gardens. Nice. I'm actually going to do more straw bale gardening this year, and so I wanted to take even more pictures and more step-by-step.
Cool. Go check it out. And they're not going to be labeled organic.
No.
They're not going to be organic, but more than likely they've come from a pasture that probably is fairly organic. I mean, they're more than likely, but you don't know. You're not going to know that for sure. So
they're not going to know.
They're not going to know that either. So you're probably never going to find like a certified organic straw bale.
I did experiment. The second year I did straw bales, I did organic fertilizer because you have to cook the bale per se with a fertilizer and water, and it gets those microbes going, and they start breaking down the straw. The organic fertilizer just did not work quite as much as a synthetic fertilizer, and I think it was just such low nitrogen that it just was so much slower. So I used a synthetic fertilizer.
They're possibly not as slow release as a synthetic fertilizer. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, you could just try it like you did an experiment and see. Yeah. So it might be a little bit trickier to go totally organic in a straw bale garden, but you can certainly avoid the typical pest sprays that you're going to... I mean, you can definitely grow it in a more natural, organic way, but it may not be completely organic.
And in my research, it said you'd have to water straw bales more, but man, that straw just holds that water in so well.
I can see that.
Yeah, for sure.
And back to sourcing straw bales, another source. Like I'm lucky enough. I live in a rural area. There's a farmer around me that produces them and sells them.
There you go.
So,
yeah, if you have a local.
that's a great source if you can find it.
Local hookup.
I've found connections for that on Craigslist and other places. So sometimes there's folks out there. Or this gentleman I just found through word of mouth. So ask around if you live in a rural area. You might have somebody close that has it.
I actually had a guy who saw my straw bale gardening YouTube video. He emailed me, and he makes different sizes.
Oh, wow.
So
Different
he had-
size straw bales?
Yeah, so he had like
interesting.
mini ones and really huge ones. It was really a cute idea.
Doesn't get better than
Customize
that.
your garden.
Yeah.
I love it. Awesome. Cool. Keep those questions coming, guys. We're working on down the list here. Sally's asking the difference between bagged topsoil, garden soil, and potting mix. So it depends what you want to use it for. That's going to dictate your choice. So potting soil, if you're buying a potting mix, is usually a mixture of anything that's not soil. So peat moss, vermiculite, perlite, typically, right? So it's really light. It holds a lot of water. That's great for containers. Always use a potting mix in a container.
And often referred to as a soilless mix.
Yes.
You know,
Soilless media,
indicates-
potting mix, those would all be similar.
Oh, she just used the soilless media term.
Soilless media. That's what it's officially called. Garden soil is going to be, like it sounds, garden soil that's dug up, put in a bag for you to purchase, essentially. So you might use the garden soil if you're filling a raised bed. Or if you have like a low area in your garden that you need to fill, you might use...
But it's going to have that mineral component of soil in it. So, mineral particles as opposed to, a potting soil that's like peat and more organic things typically. So it's definitely going to drain differently.
It's going to be a lot heavier. It's going to have less drainage than a soilless mix, And then lastly, we've got topsoil.
Just probably about the same thing
Similar,
as garden soil
very
is.
similar,
They're just marketing it in
Yeah,
a different way.
exactly. So usually, like when I went to fill my raised beds, what I purchased was bulk topsoil, and so I didn't want to do bags because I had too many beds to fill in. So I called a company and got a delivery of bulk topsoil, which would be very similar to bulk garden soil. It would be a similar idea.
And in your research, when it comes to filling raised beds or containers, you'll see all these different combinations. I use like a mix of topsoil, potting soil, and compost.
Compost, yeah.
And just mix it all together, and then I get kind of the benefits. Because he's right when he tells you, that soilless media is great for house plants or great for container gardens, but then if you add a little bit of compost in there, then you get those extra nutrients that you wouldn't get from that.
Yeah.
And it tends to be heavier. I'm a soil snob. I mean, I love my soilless media. I'm
Me
a
too.
greenhouse girl.
I would say I'd stick that everywhere.
I know.
So lightweight. It's easy. It's
like I said, if the roots can't mine the soil, they're not going to be happy. But if they can, you pick it up and it's like beautiful soil and the roots can mine the soil, you'll have great plants.
Primo. So go for the potting soil and the containers. That's a lightweight, well-drained mix. Anything with soil in it is going to be heavier, less drained. So you just got to figure out where you're using.
Yeah, and I'd say if I'm using the real garden soil type stuff, I'm definitely mixing in some compost.
Yes.
Maybe
Yeah,
about a
anytime
third
compost is going to be helpful, for sure. Okay, John's asking, best way to start currant cutting. I'm not quite sure what you're asking there, John, so see if you can add that back in again. He might have been talking about
like
that.
currants,
like currants. If we
the
can,
cutting?
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Personally, I can't answer that question, but I do know someone who can. We have a local foods and small farms educator in Bloomington. His name is Bill Davison, and he runs a food forest. And actually, last weekend, he just did a propagation workshop.
Oh, nice.
And they propagated currants. So, if you can, go to, Livingston McLean Woodford's website, you'll find Bill's email, and he probably has some information.
Cool.
Do you know anything on?
I don't know specifically how you'd propagate them, but I've propagated a lot of things from cuttings. It's probably getting a little bit late now for dormant cuttings.
Yeah.
And that means, you've taken a cutting of twig before any development happens, and a lot of times you add, rooting hormone to the bottom and put it in a pot. And willows are an example of one that doesn't really
you don't even
rooting
need a hormone
or anything.
Stick it in.
Readily go. Just to kind of generally summarize how you do hardwood cuttings, sometimes you're looking for the last year's growth that propagates best on a particular species, or sometimes it's further down the twig depending on how that works. I tried some lilac cuttings this spring that didn't work out from hardwood cuttings, and I knew based on recommendations, horticulture textbooks and things recommend softwood cuttings, which you take after the leaves develop.
Yeah.
I just know anytime I've tried a softwood cutting, I've really had problems keeping it going, because you cut it off with leaves intact from its root system and expect that little twig to push out leaves or roots down here to support those leaves, and it's just really hard to do. So I knew that I was breaking a rule, but it definitely didn't work out. I got them to leaf out, but they've
So you're going to try some softwood this spring and see?
I think for the lilacs, I think what I'm going to do is go back to the shrub I got them from and dig some root suckers. I think is my next step. And I guess if I absolutely have to, try some softwood cuttings, but it's a family heirloom plant that was planted several generations ago, and so folks are interested in having some cuttings for their home garden, so we're going to give it a try whatever way we need to. But
being a greenhouse girl, I don't know how many times I'm going to say greenhouse girl. Sorry, I'm a greenhouse girl. When I take cuttings of stuff with big leaves, I always cut half the leaves off.
Yeah, just leave a couple at the top.
And I might. Let's see if I can do a cutting demonstration.
Going rogue here.
So we'll see. We have the cutting right here. So I know that if I can you use your hand?
Yeah, would you like me to?
The hand.
If I pinch these leaves off down here, this right here. I'm going to pinch those leaves off, then pinch that bottom off. Well, that's where the roots are going to come from, right there. The nodes. So if I have like big leaves here, I might cut some of them off, but I might even just tear them in half like this. And that will have, it's less stuff for it to try to maintain while it's forming roots. So I used to do that all the time in the greenhouse, and it made me so much more successful in rooting vegetative tip cuttings like this.
Yeah, you don't need a ton of leaves.
Yeah, it makes sense too, because that bigger leaf surface is going to, suck more water up from the roots and cause a larger demand for water. So
I have master gardeners that'll take, coleus cuttings, and I'll go behind them and cut the leaves in half, because it's not going to be as successful with all those leaves it has to sustain.
But gosh, it does seem counterintuitive to be,
I know.
cutting it any more than you already are.
You got to do what you got to do, though.
But yeah, here you have like the voice of experience that's done that and knows it's effective. And
nice. Cool.
And we say voice of experience. We have killed more plants than y'all of you guys have.
For sure.
Guaranteed.
For sure. Nothing wrong with that.
We know how to kill them. We know how to grow them, but we know how to kill them too.
Yeah, the important thing is each time you kill a plant, you learn something from how that
you know
happened.
how to do it better the next time. Awesome.
I know I have lots of clients that get devastated over not being able to grow a certain plant. I'm like, don't grow that plant.
Yeah, just grow something else.
Grow something. There's so many plants out there. There's easier plants. Don't grow that plant. You have problems with roses. Don't grow that plant. You don't like the Japanese beetles. Don't grow roses.
Grow a rose. Cool. Okay, we've had a couple of questions about, will this be available later? Yep, absolutely. You can come back to the Facebook page and watch this again at any time. And will we be doing more of these? Absolutely. We'll be back. So you'll be tired of us by the time we're done with these.
No.
So Bridget's also asking about the Dixon Springs Ag Center, if they're going to be open this year for picking. And I do not know that, Bridget. I would give them a call. On our website, you can find the contact for the Dixon Springs Ag Center. And I'm sure they'd be able to let you know that. So, Okay, let's see. Carolyn, does mosquito fogging kill good bugs needed to control plant and tree killing bugs? So basically, does mosquito fogging kill other good insects? What do we think?
Actually, I kind of know the answer to this question.
Oh, yeah.
And mosquitoes are really easy to kill, so sometimes they use low rates or, not really harsh chemicals to kill mosquitoes. Mm-hmm. So then those chemicals are not high enough, or they're not harmful enough to kill other insects. But, I'm not a big fan. Even organic compounds will kill beneficial insects, and I love having that diversity of insects in my garden. I wish I could say that there's an easy answer to mosquitoes, but if the number one thing about mosquitoes is no standing water. If you have mosquitoes, there is standing water somewhere. Mm-hmm. It may not be your house. It could be your neighbor's house. So that's another thing that you could potentially, work on, making sure there's no standing water. There's also, DEET is amazing when it comes to mosquito repellent. Mm-hmm. You do have to reapply it. And then Phil Nixon, our retired entomologist from Extension, had sent us an article about a lemongrass extract, organic compound that worked just as well as DEET. Am I saying DEET right?
DEET, yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, and I think my family's used some of that lemongrass type extract stuff, and it works pretty well. I guess another thing that you might think about with respect to not being bothered by mosquitoes in the garden is timing when you're working in the garden. Mm-hmm. I know I like to be up early in the morning and doing that first thing, and that's probably a pretty mosquito-y time, where if you could time it for afternoon when they're just less active, when it's really warm out and hot. I know I've just been eaten alive in the morning sometimes and had to wait till afternoon to get out there, but there's definitely a daily fluctuation in where the mosquitoes are. So
awesome. Okay, we've got about 12 minutes left, guys, so let's get through these last couple ones here. Bridget, growing tomatoes in a pile of leaves. What do we think? Potatoes. What did I say? Tomatoes? Potatoes in a pile of leaves. Doable? What do you think?
I think it's doable.
I think it probably is. You might want to add a little bit of potting mix to it, or compost, or something a little bit more, but I know I've done that a lot of times with the potatoes, where I'll just do a ring of fencing, and I'll put the potatoes in the bottom and then just keep adding more potting mix or leaves or whatever to it, and just kind of keep piling it up.
Yeah, I think it would work.
I think it would work pretty good. Try it out and see.
They do. I've read about straw, where you just grow in layers of straw. And straw bales. Grow potatoes in straw bales.
There you go.
However, my experience with straw bale gardening and potatoes, they were just a little bit smaller.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's because it heated up too fast, and they need to be colder longer to expand.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
But, small potatoes taste just as good as big potatoes.
That's true. Sometimes even better. Yeah.
And it's easier to harvest.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm guessing some of that comment was about the fact that there's abundant leaves in your yard.
Oh, yeah,
to use
for sure.
This. So,
for sure.
From that standpoint, I think it's a good use of leaves.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, Carolyn's asking, is mulch sourced from healthy trees? Can mulch made using sick trees, like an oak with oak wilt, could that cause disease to spread to healthy trees in your yard?
Really, I know of very few things that can be transferred through mulch, because if you think about the process that's happened from the time that was a living tree, it's went through a wood chipper first. Yeah. It's been chopped up.
Broken down.
So it breaks those particles of wood down, and then there's a very active microbial community that starts to fire up in there to start to decompose that wood. And if you've ever dug into a pile of mulch in the wintertime and pulled a scoop off, steam comes up. I mean, it's really warm from all that microbial activity. So a lot of that really breaks down a lot of the pathogens that you would normally have in, just a log laying there. So it's really, in general, for me, it's not something I ever worry about with my mulch. Yeah. Now, probably the best mulch you can get is that whole tree, just straight out of the chipper kind of mulch, but it's got a lot of leaves and other things besides wood in it, so it can actually be harmful right away to put around sensitive plants because of some of that microbial activity and all that action
Well, and it's also
going
going to
on,
pull
so.
some nitrogen to aid in like that decomposition process.
So that's probably the best mulch you can get, but you do need to age it a little bit before you're spreading it. But anyway, yeah.
So the answer is no. They're not always sourced from healthy trees, but luckily you're probably not going to transmit anything through mulch for the most part. So go if you got some free mulch somewhere, I would say go ahead.
Yeah,
and
I
take
usually accept about any mulch source I can get.
Exactly.
Because if it doesn't look good when it comes into my place, I let it sit there and hang out for 6 months
Let it
or a
decompose
year
a little.
and decompose a little.
Awesome. Okay, Adam is asking about creeping charlies. Taken over about half of his backyard this far. Is it still best to apply herbicide during the flowering phase in the spring and then again after first frost?
Wah, wah.
Set off a bomb. That's what I would do. No, creeping. Honestly,
that's a tough one.
Flowering probably is the best phase to spray. If you're going to spray an herbicide, the plant has used up the most of its amount of energy while it's flowering. So that is probably a great time.
A weak point in its life cycle. Just like we don't want to prune trees and shrubs right after they flower. They've used a lot of energy.
Yep. So,
but then, you need to, according to the herbicide label, what you use, you need to read it and find out when you can plant again, because you need to plant again, or it's going to come back.
Yeah, something needs to compete with it, whether that's grass or something else.
And that's probably been my biggest challenge with it, is just getting something else to grow there besides creeping charley, because you can get rid of it and pull it out. But it's what do you get back in there?
Something's got to outcompete it, or it'll be back. No problem.
Just keep at it.
I really feel like creeping. I feel like creeping charley is in my yard to stay, and I just need to learn to enjoy it.
Yeah.
But we had some issues in one garden, so we put down cardboard, and then we put mulch on top, and that actually killed it.
Yeah, if you can smother it, put something to keep the light out.
That's one suggestion I've given to folks before, is like, maybe that's a spot for a shade garden then. And I actually did that to a whole area under a sugar maple in our yard that wasn't solid creeping charley, but it's part of our raging creeping charley patch that's that side yard. So that's a good way to kind of just put in plants that can compete, that are shade plants. I did hostas in there because I had some to transfer from somewhere else in my property, but there's a lot of great shade plants. We've talked about Hellebores as one.
Cool.
This week.
Exactly. Okay, Adam's also asking about what can he do to get rid of tree suckers. They're so annoying to trim every 2 weeks around my apple tree and crabapple, and they only seem to get worse every year.
Yeah, I haven't really found a great solution to that other than just mechanically cutting them and
keep cutting
getting
them
down at the soil line as close as you can. If they're coming out of the soil, maybe a little bit below if you can, and covering that with mulch. Now, you don't want mulch up next to the tree trunk because that could be detrimental to the tree. If they're growing off the trunk, cutting them right at that. I don't know if we've probably talked about this before on this Facebook Live, just cutting at the branch union as opposed to in the middle of the stem, but cutting right at that branch union and trying to get them back as close to the trunk, or if they're coming up out of the soil at the soil line, but they're just kind of a maintenance issue.
Really, you just got to keep cutting them, unfortunately.
You know what my answer to that question is? Don't grow crabapple.
Or grow another crabapple that's not as prone to suckering, because not all of them shoot up a lot of suckers.
And think about it, that crabapple is a really popular tree. It's probably had more and more,
breeding work.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I remember
there are so many varieties available.
I remember when a product came out that said if you could spray it on your suckers, it would stop them. Yeah, it didn't work. It didn't work. So I wish we could answer the question. If we could, if we did have that spray that worked, we'd be rich.
Yeah.
But crabapple is just one of those things.
Keep cutting them. Okay, we've got a few questions here. Bridget, how do you grow peanuts starting out?
Wow.
Where do you order them? Peanuts are really fun to grow. The times I've done it, I've just planted seed. You can order, I don't know if I've seen peanut seed in a garden center recently, but I think we ordered it online. Just planted it from seed, and if you're familiar with peanuts, they grow under the ground, so it's a really cool plant to grow and harvest. But I've always done it from seed. Have you either grown peanuts?
I've never grown them. I've always been interested though.
They're cool.
And I hear that the raw or like unprocessed peanuts are really delicious. So.
I used to garden for a lady in Champaign that fed squirrels peanuts, and
Oh, interesting.
I would have to weed peanuts out of her garden.
Oh, yeah. Oh. So they're pretty easy.
And it took me a while. Actually, it took me a while to realize what it was, because I had never seen a peanut grow before. But
so it's pretty easy.
it was very easy, and it was just something that she got from a feed store. So
Very cool. Okay, we've got a couple of other how do I get rid of. So Laurel's asking about poison ivy taking over her yard. I have to work in and on the garden. How do I get rid of it?
Really tough when it's intermixed with a lot of other plants. I mean, I'm really fortunate, and knock on wood, I don't want this to ever change, but I really don't get poison ivy. I mean, I've had a little tiny fleck on my, really soft spots of skin on my hands or arms.
So you're either not allergic to it, or you've been very cautious.
Yeah, no, I think I'm probably not allergic to it, because I'm not cautious enough in the woods to stay away from it. But, just for any woody vegetation, if you can cut that trunk off and get a herbicide right on the cut part of that stem, and I know poison ivy, it's a little dinky tiny stem, that's going to be the most effective way to kill it. Secondly is probably foliar spray, then you don't have to touch it.
Yep.
You're spraying the leaves. But if there's other plants around it, that's where I've gotten into issues with that, is there's other things around it that I don't want to impact.
Yeah, you almost have to paint it on if it's intermixed.
Like if it's a glyphosate, then maybe you're killing everything. If it's a 2,4-D, then that might be more specifically kill the, and you're not killing everything. However, I've done some rejuvenation of yards where I was like, I'm not even going to discern between plants, because this is
just kill it all.
Unlike him, I get poison ivy, and it's awful. So
Well, so I've even done kind of like hand pulling of it. I mean, again, you're getting.
Wow.
I would wear
good
gloves.
As an extension agent, we do not suggest that.
Do not burn it either.
Do not cut it up.
My only point in mentioning that, though, is it has a kind of wimpy root system.
Yeah, it's fairly easy to pull.
I don't know. I've never pulled it.
And you can kind of hoe it out, too. I mean, it comes out of the ground pretty easy, but also along those lines, that root system is what you're trying to kill with that systemic herbicide you put on it. So it's pretty susceptible and dies pretty readily if you get a good herbicide application on it.
Cool. Okay, well, we are almost to 1 o'clock, so we're going to finish it off with how do we get rid of Yucca, Bindweed, and Rose of Sharon. Everybody's got a lot of stuff they want to get rid of today. So starting with Yucca, I've experienced this myself. I've had it in my yard, and I didn't want it, so I thought, I'll cut it back. It'll not come back, but that is not accurate. It will come back. You really have to dig it out and really dig deep and get that whole fleshy root system out of there. That's really the only way to do it, because it's got a huge root system.
A foot, 2 feet?
Pretty big. Yeah, as far as you see that root system. I mean, it's a desert plant. It's a drought-tolerant plant, so it's got a ton of roots on it. So dig it out the best you can. Bindweed.
I know that bindweed is an indicator of poor soil. That maybe you could address your soil issues, and that would take it. But again, just like with the creeping charley, with the bindweed, I've done the cardboard with the mulch on top.
That's a really great way to do it. Yeah, or just for killing turf grass to establish a new garden bed. The cardboard followed by mulch is really a knockout punch there.
Yep. Okay, and then lastly, Rose of Sharon in the flower beds. Yeah. She's digging them. She's cutting them. I would say keep at it.
Don't ever let it flower.
Yeah, don't let it go flower and go to seed. If it was me, I would get rid of the whole plant, because it's just going to keep doing that. That's just what it does.
That's what I was going to say. Maybe get rid of your source.
Yeah, and then just keep cutting, keep digging. You could use an herbicide if you're not going to affect other stuff. But.
The pollinators love it.
Yes, they do. But if you want it everywhere, that's great. Yeah. Okay, awesome. One final question here from Colleen, and this is an excellent question. She's interested in the Master Gardener program, but has found only weekday classes. Do we offer weekends? Some of our units have tried some weekend trainings, but we also have an online training program too that you can do anytime from home. So, Colleen, check with your local extension office. I think you said you're in Orland Park. And ask them when their next training is, and ask about the online program. Registration's actually open right now for it. So that's a great way to do it if you do kind of have a more flexible schedule.
So they would kind of register through their home office.
Yeah, yep. So you want to go to your local extension office, and you'll go through an interview and application process. But yeah, we'd love to have you. So cool. Well, thank you guys for all of the awesome questions today. We didn't even get to all of our show and tell stuff because that's okay. You had so many awesome questions. So thanks again. This will be still available on the Facebook page, so you can definitely go back and watch this. We're going to talk now about when to schedule our next one. So we will be back. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Bye. Thank you.